So now we open the floor for discussion, and the Q&A box is open for anybody who would like to submit questions for Laura or for Anja. I'd like to start with a question sort of echoing Dr. Newcomb's question from the start of the discussion for the last panel, just drawing our attention to the title of this panel, and asking our panelists to sort of reflect sort of more directly on that question. The question is, of course, which yoga text should I be studying? And Anja spoke about the Haṭhapradīpikā, and Laura spoke about the Yoga Sutra. But again, like Dr. Newcomb, I'd like to sort of expand that question and think more broadly about how important it is for practitioners of contemporary yoga, particularly the sort of postural variety. How important is it for them to study these Sanskrit texts? How important is it for them to engage with the sort of philological study of them and the philosophical study of them? Maybe we could go to Anja first to give Laura sort of a little bit of breathing room. Anja, what do you think? How important is it for contemporary practitioners to engage with these texts and the study of them?
Thank you for the question. From a personal point of view, I think it is very, very important to have an understanding, to look at the text, and to, I think it relates a little bit to what Laura said in the end, that to see what makes sense to a practitioner today and what doesn't, to get to see them in the context, in a historical context, as far as that is possible, but at the same time also to see them in the context of the contemporary practitioner, to navigate these both contexts. And then, yeah, it depends where the practitioner wants to go as well, like which goal they have, if they go to a yoga session for wellness reasons, or if they go to a yoga session because they, yeah, self-help, which is another buzzword today. So then, yeah, that also, I think, matters in if you should, or if how far you should go into the study of the text. But yes, in general, I think it is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Anja. Laura, do you have an answer to this question?
Yes, thanks for that good question. It's a very deep question, actually. I think I would differentiate between practitioners and teachers. So if you are just a yoga practitioner that goes once a week to a yoga class and you want to get into the original context and text of the Yoga Sutra, maybe with some Sanskrit references, you might be very much have too much information, and still it would be interesting and relevant to everybody who just practices yoga to look into these texts. But of course, if you do yoga teacher training, it is there's no way around it, I think. And which text should you be studying? Well, it gets more and more difficult with the outcome of yoga research, like Jason Birch's research and so on. We have so many texts that we could be studying right now. But of course, the Yoga Sutra and the most known Hatha Yoga text, like Haṭhapradīpikā, Giranda Samhita, which is an old, younger text, but still should be studied, especially in the context of cultural appropriation. If you don't know anything about the history and the texts of yoga, and we are a yoga teacher and we teach that I think might have been acceptable in the 20th century, but today we just know so much more, and we should really, we have the informations, and we should really try to get them.
Thank you very much, Laura. Is it possible to create a sort of, I mean, you've obviously reflected on this with regards to the impacts that yoga research is having on the field, but is it possible to create a definitive list of the texts that should be studied?
Anja, do you want to?
Can you say the question again, please?
Sure. Is it at all possible to create any kind of definitive list of which texts that should be studied?
I don't think so, because it's it's an expanding field of knowledge, and I think I would just the text one connects with best, like to find some point of entrance and then go from there, and that is most likely different for every single practitioner.
Yeah, I mean, we know today that the Yoga Sutra is not the absolute basis of everything we do today, which was often stated in the 20th century. But still, I think we still come from those yoga pioneers' work of the 20th century, be it Swami Shivananda or Krishnamacharya or their students, and just to understand their work and how they understood yoga and how they transmitted yoga into a global modernity, I think one should also look at those texts mainly, or maybe first, that they used, because I think that gives us much more understanding also of our, let's say, history as yoga practitioners and teachers in the 21st century. And this is our history. These were the people who brought yoga to the West and who gave us, of course, a modernized form of yoga and so on. We all know that, but still, so that maybe the first entrance point, and then of course the further you go, the more interesting it is that now there's so much more knowledge and research and translations of other texts that show us also about Indian, the richness of Indian textual culture. And so there's no definite list, but maybe like a starting point and a go from there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your thoughts, both of your thoughts on that question there, both of you. There's a couple of questions coming through from other panelists actually for Anja, and I'll sort of, a couple of them are a little bit similar to each other, so I'll sort of summarize them. Anja, could you talk a little bit about the extent to which the interpretations of the translators that you discussed remained in academic circles, or whether or not they had influence on the way in which Hatha Yoga was evaluated by early 20th century Germans, and maybe the extent to which, if so, they've had influence more recently. How have these translations and these translators had influence on the practice of yoga in Germany since their work?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Up till the Second World War, they were very influential on German Indology. It's quite interesting, I think, because they were aware of the English translation, so they mainly dismissed the English translations. They usually referred to Walter's Haṭhapradīpikā as the main work on Hatha Yoga during that time, like the translation of Hatha as forceful or powerful. They accept that without questioning that in English text it might be translated as sun and moon. And so it's quite influential, though. What is not influential about Hermann Walter's work is that he gives more credibility to the practice, and most other Indologists later on don't do that anymore. They say it's not a valid practice in the end. And the question about how much it influences the practitioners, I'm not sure about the turn of the century, but I know that till today, Hermann Walter's publication is used in teacher trainings in Germany. For example, Power Yoga Germany, they use it in their teacher training, and they also, a lot of teacher trainings recommend reading that translation of the Haṭhapradīpikā, and it has been, his publication has also been translated into English. I'm not sure when, but yeah, there's a translation into English as well, so there might be some more traces into English speaking.
Thank you very much. Just to sort of extend that a little bit, are you aware potentially about the sort of contexts in which these translators chose to translate these particular texts? What explains their interest in the Haṭhapradīpikā particularly? Why did they choose this text?
I was actually wondering the same. I looked as Hermann Walter's papers are in Canada, and I actually went there and had a look, and I don't know if he practiced yoga. It doesn't say anything. The university where he worked in Canada says it's his passion. That's why he wrote his PhD about it. There might be an influence from Kuhn in Munich. But yeah, it's one of the questions I have as well. Like, why did he choose to translate that text? And he is influenced by Paul yoga philosophy. So that is, that might be another way to look into it. And for Schmidt, it was mainly, at least that is what he says in his foreword, it was mainly the will of his publisher to translate the text and to look at these kind of sources.
Thanks, Anja. It'd be really interesting to find out why the publisher particularly was interested in this text. It seems like I don't know who this publisher was, but it seems like an interesting decision for them to make to ask for this text to be translated.
Yeah, it might. It's me blindly guessing, but its availability, and also there were these illustrations. It was on the title of my page, which belonged to the Giranda Samhita. So he had both the text and these illustrations, so that, yeah, that might be one reason. And he does say he wants to translate a different text than Walter already translated. Yeah.
Thank you very much. In a similar vein, then, we've got a couple of questions come through in the Q&A box. For Laura, how do you think, why was the Yoga Sutra particularly chosen to be the source for postmodern yoga practices? How come this viewer asks, how come the classical yoga became related to the physical practice?
Yeah, it's a kind of a bigger loop that one would have to go. How can I make that quick? So first of all, it was Vivekananda. I mean, he chose the text. He translated it into English, and I think it came out in 1896 with his own commentary, a very loose and modern commentary, also with a focus on the Ashtangas, and he left out many other contents of the sutra. And that had a time context to do with his presentation in the world religion. I just can't remember the name of this big gathering.
World Parliament of Religion?
World Parliament of Religion in 1893. Thanks. I had a knot in my head. And so he wanted to kind of introduce Hinduism as a religion that is kind of as important as other world religions. And the Yoga Sutra was a short text that had already, where some like Westerners had already had interest in, and had already been Vedanticized before, so before Vivekananda in India itself. So he could sort of take that short text and introduce yoga, which had already been a point of interest to the West. He could introduce that to Americans, and so the Yoga Sutra became extremely famous. And I think no one afterwards could really leave it out. So everybody, also then the yoga pioneers of yoga as a physical practice, they had to reference to that text. And it has the Ashtangas, which are very kind of, they can be very well included also with Hatha yogic ideas, because they also have a system of Ashtangas or Shatangas, 6 limbs. So yeah, it is a historical process, I would say. And it just became, like, the interest became bigger and bigger in the course of the 20th century. Yeah. Just to make it very, very short.
Thank you, Laura. Beyond those sort of historical processes, is there anything you think sort of inherent to the Yoga Sutra as a text particularly that made it attractive to people like Vivekananda or indeed more recent contemporary yoga practitioners?
Well, I think that also changes with time, because at the beginning of the reception, like Theosophists and Vivekananda and others were extremely into, and also Anja knows also about that, early psychologists and philosophers here in Germany. I also wrote my master's thesis around that topic here in Germany, early 20th century. They were very interested in mental practices, and especially those ones from the East. So they wanted to have, like, this reference point to the East. And so that was the first interest in the Yoga Sutra. There was no interest that had to do with physical practices. And it's interesting to ask how did the text become such a manual for contemporary physical practices. This is another kind of process in the 20th century that became, let's say, nahm ein Eigenleben an. Everybody who speaks German, it took its own life somehow, the text and this process of engagement between physical practices and the text. It also has to do with Pattabhi Jois, who always said, this is Patanjali yoga, what we do here on the mat. He called it, or it was maybe also just said afterwards that this practice is called Ashtanga yoga, which is also a reference to the Yoga Sutra. And but he also always made a big enigma about it. What is this Patanjali in this practice? And so people started to interpret and started to make also their own thoughts about this. Yeah, but I think just philosophical contents from old India, especially Germans, but Westerners just loved it. It's such an old text. Has many aspects.
Thank you very much. Anja, Laura mentioned that you might know more about the sort of history of interest in mental practices. Is there anything you'd like to add, just to put you on the spot there?
Thank you. Yeah, the interest was mainly in psychology and hypnosis and auto-suggestion. And I get the understanding, but maybe that's my angle of viewing the material, that first it actually was applied to Hatha yoga and then later on to Patanjali yoga. And I'm not sure if I'm frozen now.
We can still hear you. Hey, oh, we've lost Anja. Hopefully she comes back. Anyway, in the meantime, we have another question in the chat, in the Q&A, sorry, for you, Laura. The questioner asks, did you confront the teachers in your fieldwork with your findings and the risks that you mentioned, and how were their reactions? And then furtherly, were the teachers all German, or did they have more diverse backgrounds? Were any from India? You're muted, Laura.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, thanks for the good questions. I didn't see it as my task to confront directly anybody. I also am not kind of against these developments. I observed them, I described them, and of course afterwards we are agents here in the field, and we have maybe our opinions, which I then also give as interpretations or conclusions, but my book is available for free online, so everybody can just read what I said there, and I think many people did, and I do think that the field changes and the interest grows bigger into having different accesses to old Indian texts. Yeah. What was the second part of the question?
The second part was, what was the backgrounds of the teachers that you were?
Yes. Ronald Stenner is, to my knowledge, just German, but I interviewed many American teachers. So I tried to not only stay in Germany, but to focus on Ashtanga yoga. So I wanted to have kind of a thick description of the field of Ashtanga yoga. That means looking at practices, looking at text interpretations, looking at what students say, what experts say, to kind of look at the whole field, but not to compare different styles of yoga, which would have been very interesting. Also to compare to what happens in India, for example, would have been very interesting. I just have personal observations from my time in Rishikesh, for example. But so yeah, I would I just have the kind of global Ashtanga yoga experts, and for the students, they were all from Germany. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura. Anja, you've managed to come back. I'm sorry that you got cut off there. Is there anything you wanted to finish off with for the question about mental practices?
I'm not sure when I got cut off, but the question I was referring to was hypnosis and autosuggestion. Yeah, and I'm not sure if it's my angle of looking at the sources, but I had the idea that it was mainly applied to Hatha yoga as a necessity to understand it, like to find some entrance point into it. And I'm not sure if that also relates to Patanjali yoga, or if there was more the other direction, like to take some practices out of it.
Thank you very much, Anja. So I have and one more question, I think, from one of the panelists, which I think is directed to both contributors here. So the question is, if the rich textual history didn't exist, would yoga still be popular outside of India? Laura, maybe you can start with that.
Yeah, I read that question, Jackie. It's an amazing question. I never thought about it. So thanks for asking that. And I would be curious to hear what you have to say about it. I actually don't think so, because from the beginning on, texts were what people from the West, be it scientists or be it practitioners like theosophists, what they could get somehow, and what they then started to interpret, sometimes very much in their own understanding. Yeah, but I actually don't think so. So I don't know, Jackie, do you want to add something? Can she add something? If not, Anja?
Well, let's hear, maybe we hear from Anja first, and if Jackie would like
Yes.
to add something, she can.
Okay. I think I agree with Laura. It's an interesting question. I'm not really sure. I think I agree with Laura. I think it would have become more and more a physical practice, like dissolving into some kind of gymnastics or other forms of physical practices that we have, or what might be happening in some places at the moment anyways. So because I think after a certain amount of practices, people do get in contact with the text, and then they have another understanding. It just happens like through talks after going to a class, or maybe visiting a workshop on it. So there is this contact usually there after a certain amount of, often there after a certain amount of time. So I think it would dissolve into another physical practice. But yeah, I would also love to know what Jackie thinks.
Jackie, I think by popular acclaim, you'll need to contribute your answer.
Thank you both, and thank you, Samuel. Lovely to meet you. And yeah, I completely agree with both Laura and Anja in that I don't think without the text, it's something that really does distinguish the practice, even in a class environment, in a contemporary class environment. The knowledge that's transferred, even if it's quite disconnected from what was written 2,000 years ago, somehow it makes it such a rich experience that entangles people in the practice. So yes, thanks for answering that question.
Thank you, Jackie. Matilda, your hand's up. Do you have something you'd like to add as well?
Yes, if I may briefly, since the floor kind of became more open, because this question that Jackie asked is so pretty much related to the question that somebody asked us, Jason and myself, about asana, right? And I just had this reflection that yoga as such, be it contemporary yoga or probably let's say talk about contemporary yoga, it's such an intricate system of interrelated dynamic elements that work together, that I think, as with dynamic system, it usually is. If you take away one element, this kind of emergent whole, this meaningful whole, kind of, loses its identity, becomes something else. So, it's not only about asana practice. It's not only about this textual history and textual interpretations and seeking meaning in text. I think it's this wonderful interrelation of the embodied, of the practice, of the textual. So I think, this is a very interesting, interrelation of all those elements that create contemporary yoga. Thanks for letting me speak.
Thank you, Matilda. I'm just going to take an opportunity to ask a question that I want to ask of the panelists, if that's okay. Laura, you briefly mentioned the chanting of the Yoga Sutra by Ashtanga practitioners. This is something which I'm quite interested in my own research, the use of chants and mantras in modern contemporary practice. I'd be really interested to hear more about how that chanting practice sort of proceeds amongst Ashtanga practitioners. Is there emphasis perhaps on memorizing the text? Is there a sort of sonic equivalence of asana practice? In my research, one of my participants, for example, described chanting as getting her to the same place as a vigorous asana practice. How is that chanting experienced by the practitioners that you interviewed or spoke to?
What did you say? Getting to the same place with chanting, like with intense asana practice? like kind of a state of being immersed into
the same sort of absorption. Yes.
Absorption. Sorry, that was the word. Yeah. So like in my field, it was a bit interesting because I, as an Indologist, somehow changed the field, which is normal. So when you have to reflect about that, but it's just what happens. You don't try to change too much, but in the moment, your presence is there somehow. So I was often asked like, how would you chant that? And I was like, well, I never learned to chant that. I don't know how to do that. Don't ask me. But I realized there was no tradition behind that. At least Joyce didn't chant that. So that in the Ashtanga, just for Ashtanga teachers who had just contact to Joyce, they did not have that. At least for the ones that came later, I don't know what was earlier. If it happened at some point, I don't know that. But as far as I know, that didn't happen. So they somehow started to learn with other teachers. They started to learn with Sanskrit teachers from Mysore, for example, how to pronounce, how to chant. So it's kind of a new evolving tradition that I'm talking about here when it comes to my research findings, because it was a process of finding. So how do we pronounce? Can we chant like a song, or should we more like talk it as a how is the word in English? Like a uttering, like a how mantras, huh?
Like a recitation.
Recitation, that is a word. Thanks, same word as in German. And so that were questions, and then that. Also about why do we chant? It was a process of understanding, and also then building meaning why it is done. For example, also to get the same state as that was sought after by asana practice, a state of absorption, as one way to that state, but also to kind of feel and embody the sutra. And I also heard that Sanskrit is a holy language, and if you just chant it, you will the knowledge will reveal itself to you. So all of this was there, and like often in modern yoga, one could pick a bit out what is best personal reason for chanting. So that was my experience in my field.
Thank you very much, Laura. And thank you very much to both Laura and to Anja for their contributions and their presentations. It's been absolutely fascinating. We've come to the end of our Q&A and discussion session, so I will say a big thank you again to both Laura and Anja, and to Jackie and Matilda for their brief contributions as well, and hand back over to Chris for the end of our session. Thank you, everyone.